Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanstra Shri Rupam Sagadatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamstra Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyastra Krupa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So, welcome to this continued study of Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2. So today we'll be concluding Chapter 2. So last week we discussed this yoga ladder and this kind of schematic showing how we go from Karma Yoga to Jnana Yoga to Ashtanga Yoga, Buddhi Yoga, and ultimately Bhakti Yoga. Each process of yoga is purifying us, and as one moves from one step to the other, one increases in purification and increases in knowledge. So purification, one purifies their material desires, and one gains knowledge, and ascending knowledge ultimately of Krishna. And that is the complete realization, knowing Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the process of yoga is the purifying process which helps one progress. And we talked about Nishkam Karma Yoga last time. And when you add knowledge of the soul, of the spiritual, of the spirit versus matter, so this Karma Yoga plus Jnana Yoga is the Buddhi Yoga. And we talked a little bit about that, and how in Jnana Yoga one has impersonal realization of the Supreme. In Ashtanga Yoga and Buddhi Yoga one has Paramatma realization. And finally in Bhakti Yoga one has full Bhagavan realization. Right? So as we add Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga together, we get Buddhi Yoga. When you add meditation on the Paramatma, you get Ashtanga Yoga. And when you add devotional service, you come to the platform of Bhakti Yoga. And the main distinction between Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga, it is when one surrenders. In Karma Yoga, one surrenders after performing work. So one does the work they desire, but they surrender the fruits. But in Bhakti Yoga, one surrenders both the work and the fruit. So one does only what Krishna wants them to do. And so this is the difference, and we'll see this distinction in chapter 9 of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna will say, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam. And this is where Krishna is saying, you offer to me these things. Whereas in the following verse, he'll describe Nishkam Karma Yoga, Yad Karoshi Yadashnasi, Yad Karoshi Yadashi Yat. That whatever you do, whatever homage you do, whatever you offer, whatever charity you do it for me. So this is the distinction, when one surrenders. Right? So, and again, in the end, Krishna is going to tell us to give up all these different yogas and do devotional service. And this is why Srila Prabhupada is speaking about Bhakti Yoga in the purport of chapter 2, though technically Bhakti has not yet been fully introduced. But he wants to make sure that if we stop at chapter 2, we know ultimately what Krishna is going to tell us to do, which is to do devotional service. Right? So last time we introduced this concept of Buddhi Yoga. So just a quick introduction again of that, or reintroduction, is that one fixes in divine consciousness while working. So this again is combination of karma, activity, and consciousness, meditation on the Supreme, right? So this is on the Jnana platform. So karma plus Jnana equals Buddhi Yoga. And they appear to be attached to the material world, but they're not. They work, but fully unattached, right? So the Buddhi Yoga goes to the office and performs so many activities. And so it appears as though they may be attached, but they are not. They are fully detached to the fruits of the work. So the materialist is trying to enjoy the fruits of the work, but the Buddhi yogi is fully detached, but both are doing activity. Right? So sometimes the activities look the same, but the consciousness is very, very different. So we see this opportunity. So, the devotee also looks to climb the corporate ladder and become the best in the field and whatever it may be, but the ultimate goal is to please Guru and Krishna. They become fixed in this instruction. And we talked a little bit about this Vyavasayamika Buddhi last time, which is to be fixed in the instruction of the spiritual master who is guiding one to be fixed in devotional service. Right? So, and ultimately we come to this mood of everything we do, we ask the question, will this please Krishna? Our service should always be in this way. Whatever I'm doing, whatever work I'm doing, will it please Krishna? And not work to please our senses, but work to please Krishna. So this is the consciousness Krishna will ultimately bring us to as we progress in this chapter. So, okay. So now we come to this very wonderful section of chapter 2, in which Arjuna is asking questions. So why does Arjuna ask questions? Well, in the 53rd verse, Krishna has said that you'll have attained the divine consciousness at the end of that verse. And Arjuna is seeking divine consciousness. His consciousness right now, or approaching, is very disturbed and volatile and full of stress and anxiety and fear. Maybe some of us are, experiencing that in today's situation as well. And if not today, it'll happen at some point in our existence. This disturbed mind, right? So Arjuna, having heard about someone who is fixed in divine consciousness when the mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery words of the Vedas, Arjuna's interest is piqued. He is curious. And so, being in such a distressed state, he says to Krishna, wait, now tell me more about this person. And this is the process of acquiring knowledge, that there is a detailed series of questions and answers. So when a topic is presented and maybe is not fully understood, then there is good questions. So Arjuna wants very detailed understanding of this person in divine consciousness. So he asks 4 really important questions. And Krishna is going to answer these 4 questions from here until the end of chapter 2. So we'll be discussing today all 4 of these questions and what the meanings of these questions are as well. So in verse 54, we see these 4 very brilliant questions. Arjuna said, O Krishna, what are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? And what is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk? So these 4 questions, each question has actually a purport, or what the actual meaning is, and our acharyas have commented on what is the meaning of that question. Of course, Arjuna is not interested in figuring out how does he sit. Does he sit upright, or is he slouched? Does he sit on a pillow or on a kusha grass? No, that is not his concern. He has a much more deeper meaning to the question of what he is trying to understand. But what we know is Arjuna is trying to really deeply understand who is this person in divine consciousness. Because if we're going to try to follow in someone's footsteps, if Arjuna is going to try to develop that same mood, he must understand it holistically, not just superficially. Oh, this person looks happy. He's wearing a dhoti kurta and tilak. Let me put dhoti kurta and tilak on and I'll be happy. No, it's much deeper than that, right? So the outer dress is not so relevant. We must go into the deeper level. So Arjuna's first question now is, what are the symptoms of whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? So this is what are his symptoms? What the meaning is? What are his characteristics, right? And how does one reveal these characteristics? How are they different from others? So this is the first question that Arjuna is asking. And Srila Prabhupada, in the purport to 54, speaks about the symptoms. There are observable traits. Like a rich man has certain symptoms. A sick person has certain symptoms. A learned person has certain symptoms. So like this, these are important observable traits. So Arjuna wants to know, what are the observable traits of a man in divine consciousness? Is it just that they have a shaved head and straight tilak? Or is it something more than that? So Arjuna is now asking. And Srila Prabhupada, one of my favorite lines in this whole Bhagavad Gita in the purport, I'll just read towards the end. He says, "It is said that a fool is undiscovered as long as he does not speak. And certainly a well-dressed fool cannot be identified unless he speaks. But as soon as he speaks, he reveals himself at once." Very nice and important. Actually, we are all fools. We have no ability to speak on this. But if we simply repeat what has been spoken by those who have intelligence, then if we speak, we'll not be foolish. But as soon as we try to speak our own understanding, our own conclusions, then we'll reveal our foolishness as soon as we begin to speak, even though we may be very well dressed. So now we get into the symptoms, the 55th verse. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, so the first response to Arjuna's question, "O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of desire for sense gratification, which arise from mental concoction, when his mind, thus purified, finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness." So this person is Sthitta Prajna. What is this Sthitta Prajna? This fixed consciousness. So Krishna gives the very important characteristic that he has given up all varieties of sense gratification, fully absorbed in Krishna, and fully satisfied in his self-realized position. There is no hankering, no wishing I had this or wishing I had that. And so only speaks about Krishna is one of the observable symptoms of this person. Right? It's easy to put dress on, but it's difficult to have this position of all varieties of sense gratification are gone. Right? So, and what do we see? How is it revealed? The person is very happy, peaceful, and totally unmoved by material sense objects. He's always happy, knowing his position as servant of Krishna, which is unchangeable by any material circumstance. This means he's free of material sense desires. As soon as the material circumstance changes, if our mood changes, it means we are still attached. We are not detached. So, but the Sthitta Prajna has absolutely no material sense desires, and they're fully engaged in Krishna's service. You can put pizza in front of them, you can put the opposite sex in front of them, you can put unlimited money in front of them, nothing registers. They're fully satisfied in their Krishna consciousness. Right? So they said, full finds satisfaction in the self alone. So no more, I want this, I want this, I want this. As soon as that's there, it means there's illusion, Maya. So this is the perspective. Um, Even to the platform of devotional service, I want to do this service. You know, I want to have this prasad. You know, that is not the consciousness that the Sthitta Prajna has. Not even only desire is to please Krishna. Right? So the critical point here is that we don't judge one's position of this divine consciousness is not based on how long one has been in spiritual life, or how one dresses, or how many verses one can recite. That is not the measure. These symptoms are actually very hard to imitate, very hard to fake. If you spend enough time, you'll observe. Right? So many, spiritual, so-called people are out there speaking on so much philosophy, but we can judge by this characteristic, how detached they are from all sense desires, how unmoved one is by all of the surroundings. Right? So this doesn't develop by artificial means. What I mean by that is, you can't just renounce the world. It's very difficult. But as we'll see repeatedly throughout these purports in this section, we're going to see one theme over and over and over again. It is only by Krishna consciousness that one can automatically, without extraneous effort, lose all the material desires. And that is due to the highest taste. And so Prabhupada speaks about, without extraneous effort, automatically, naturally, all these things he gives, one can lose the material desires when one comes to Krishna consciousness. That is the only way it can happen. So we'll see this over and over again in this section. Okay? So now we get to question 2, which question 2 is, how does he speak? So the meaning of this question is, how are the mind and words affected by love, anger, neutrality of others? How do they act or react when someone shows them great love, or when someone shows them animosity, or someone is neutral to them? So how does that person react? How are the mind and the words impacted? Do they retaliate with some harsh language? Does the mind become agitated if one doesn't show them respect? Right? So how is the mind and words affected? This person in Sthitta Prajna must have some very controlled mind and words. So that's what now Krishna will begin to explain. In the 56th verse, one who is not disturbed in mind, even amidst the threefold miseries, or elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of a steady mind. A sage of a steady mind. So the mind is undisturbed in the threefold miseries, right? Free from attachment and fear and anger. This is the position of the Sthitta Prajna. This condition is certainly tested for us today in this current situation we are all enduring. But the threefold miseries, adibautic, no miseries from other living entities, no one disturbs, friendly to all. Even the mosquito is a dear friend. Yes, come take your meal. I have plenty, no problem. Once Srila Prabhupada was, eating some fruits, and some ants had come, and the devotee went to kind of wash away the fruits to remove the ants. And Prabhupada said, "Let it be. How much they'll eat, I'll eat afterwards." So the devotee is not disturbed by other living entities. Adidaivi, natural disasters. One does not become disturbed. We are certainly in the midst of one right now. But the Sthitta Prajna is not disturbed, even amidst the threefold miseries. It's easy to be undisturbed when things are going well, when things are very, peaceful and nice externally. But even in the midst of these miseries, the Sthitta Prajna is undisturbed. And Adhyatmik, the body and mind, does not disturb. No matter what is happening, one remains fixed on the transcendental goal. Right? So this is the distinction or the characteristics and the nature, I should say, of the Stitta Prajna. Their mind and words are not disturbed. Right? And so, the Stitta Prajna sees everything as the mercy of the Lord. When bad things are happening, one understands, as Prabhupada comments in the purport, oh, I deserve so much more due to my karma. But Krishna, you are so kind, you are minimizing. You are so kind. And when something good happens, it is only by Krishna's mercy. I am actually unworthy of this good. But because Krishna is so merciful, he is bestowing upon it. One does not become overly excited and proud. But actually we are the opposite. When something good happens, I did it. And when something bad happens, Krishna, why are you doing this? But this is actually the opposite consciousness of a devotee. A devotee knows when something bad is happening, it is only due to one's past karma. But sees that actually Krishna is minimizing that suffering. It deserves so much more. He's just giving a little bit as a reminder. And when good happens, oh, that is only because Krishna is so generous. Right? So the complete opposite reaction of the materialist, who likes to blame the Lord when things don't go well, and who likes to take credit when things are going very well. So this is the understanding of the Stitta Prajna. And in the last line of the purport is a very wonderful statement that we can, memorize, and another post-it note worthy statement by Srila Prabhupada. There's no attachment or detachment, right? Just serving. So there is never success or failure in Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada says, success or no success, a Krishna conscious person is always steady in his determination. Just do the service. Whatever results, success or failure, is non-different. One remains fixed in moving forward and fixed in determination. Right? So we can observe this also. How steady are we in our devotional service? When the result comes, we're trying to organize some festival or perform some service, and whether it works or not, do we remain enthusiastic in that service? That is the mood that we are trying to develop, and that is the mood of one in fixed divine consciousness. Just do the service. And we see this extraordinarily well in the study in the life of Srila Prabhupada. When he was struggling by himself in the streets of Delhi, personally handing out back to Godheads, he was determined. And when he had thousands of followers and hundreds of temples and books flying off the shelves, he was also fixed in his determination. Success or failure, he was unmoved. And that is a sign of the Stitta Prajna, and something we can try to inculcate in our own approach. Again, success or failure, a Krishna conscious person is always steady in his determination, as says Srila Prabhupada. In the 57th verse, in the material world, one who is unaffected by whatever good or evil he may obtain, neither praising it nor despising it, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge. So again, we see equipoised, unaffected by good or bad. Can't control it. Krishna has already said earlier in this chapter, tolerate like the changing of the seasons. It's all the result of past karma. So one remains unaffected and thus can steadily focus on Krishna. And we see that so many things come in the way of our own service. One cannot chant, too much work stress or sickness or this or that. We have these different obstacles. But the Stitta Prajna finds no obstacles. Right? Good or bad, they're unaffected, as Krishna is saying here. They're not excited and elated when a big pay raise comes or a big compliment. Oh, you're doing so wonderful. No, one remains equipoised in success or in failure. It's sometimes more difficult to be equipoised in success. Someone begins to glorify something we do, and wow, and we meditate on that for, days and days and days. But the stikta prajna is unaffected by both. Right? So, coming from, again, this prior verse in this section around how to react to anger, right? When someone approaches us with anger, well, it's hard not to react when someone shows us, this animosity. But again, a Krishna conscious person, unmoved. Unmoved when someone approaches us with animosity, or unmoved when one approaches us with glorification. One is equipoise. This is the stikta prajna. Right? And so what consciousness leads to this type of sentiment? How does it develop? It's when one sees nothing in the material world as worthy of one's attention. Because one is so engrossed in Krishna that these things don't register. They're not worthy of attention. It has nothing to do with who I am as servant of Krishna. And thus one sees pebbles and gold as the same, as we'll see shortly. Everything in the material world has no value because one is attached to the higher taste, as we'll come to in a moment, of Krishna. So it's just like a rich man. When a rich man has millions of dollars, pennies and dimes and quarters don't even register. It's insignificant. Similarly, when one has come to Krishna consciousness, these other things, they don't even register. Yes, they are happening, but one's consciousness becomes unmoved. So it only happens when we have elevated our consciousness. If we're on the bodily platform, then these things will certainly disturb or give joy. Both will be there. So one in this mood is only fixed on their service, and they're not affected by any of the material interactions. Whatever is happening, it is all secondary in the mind of the devotee. And is this easy to obtain? Sounds hard, doesn't it? But actually it is. By being fixed in vyavasatmika buddhi, by fixed in the instructions of the Guru and Krishna, one can attain this state very easily. Otherwise, though, it is impossible. By being fixed in the order of Guru, in the service of Krishna, this state is very easily achieved. But without that fixed determination, without that vyavasatmika buddhi, it is impossible. So, it is possible by the right process. And we see this, as we mentioned, in Srila Prabhupada. Never affected by good or bad things that were happening. So this is very liberating, actually. We become free from these results, this up and down in devotional life. It's so liberating. Just do the service. Let the results be the possession of Krishna. So, even on the material platform, this aversion, right? Nor despising it. One doesn't even despise the material world, thinking, "Oh, it's so evil." No, one just becomes neutral. Right? So this is important in order to stay cool and calm in the midst of turbulence, particularly as we're seeing today. So much turbulence is there. But if we, bring our consciousness to the higher platform, then it is had. Okay? So now the third question. How does he sit? So the translation of this question is, how does one not engage their senses? What is the mentality of the person when the senses are restrained? Are they irritable? Like when someone hasn't yet had their tea in the morning, are they irritable and cranky? Or what is the mood of the person who has restrained their senses? So, as we're going to see now, the controlling of the senses is the critical path to success. And almost a remainder of this section, Krishna is going to be speaking about sense control and how to bring the senses to a higher platform. And Prabhupada, throughout the purports, is going to emphasize over and over and over again how one can very practically control the senses. and how one can very naturally and without extraneous effort control the senses. But this is going to be the theme. The core characteristic of this Sthitta Prajna person is no material sense desires. And now, in order to have no material sense desires, it means one's senses are controlled. So we're going to see that now here in the next many verses. Okay? So in 58, one who is able to withdraw his senses from the sense objects, as the tortoise draws its limbs from within the shell, it is firmly fixed in perfect consciousness. Okay? So fixed when senses are withdrawn like the tortoise. One can fully control their senses. They use them when needed, but withdraw them when necessary. And when does a Krishna conscious person use their senses? When they become used to please Krishna. Never any other time. One uses their senses when they can be used to please Krishna's senses. That is the appropriate use of them. Otherwise, they are withdrawn in the midst of all material sense objects, jewels and money and wealth and beauty and nothing. They become very controlled. And how is it possible to control the senses like this with so many material elements? Senses are strong like venomous serpents. So how to control them? Well, we get this in the next verse. Though the embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, the taste for sense objects remain. But seizing such engagement by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in Krishna consciousness. And this is the supreme glory and mercy of the Supreme Lord. That, restraining the senses is very difficult. Nobody likes restrictions. But Krishna says, don't stop the senses. Just engage them in a higher purpose. Right? So the key to remaining peaceful when the senses are restrained from material sense objects, it only happens when the senses are engaged in a higher taste. Right? So artificial restriction nobody likes. Why do all diets fail? Because we can temporarily avoid foodstuffs, sweets and fried foods, but the taste doesn't dissipate for those items, and ultimately will fall back to that taste. Right? How can we give up, so many activities? We sometimes wonder as we come to Krishna consciousness, I'll never be able to give up eating outside or onion and garlic or this or that. But once you taste Radha Kunj Bihari's Mahaprasad, wow, all those things become irrelevant. And we actually become, how I was even enjoying that. Why? How that could come? Because now we've experienced a higher taste. No more movies, no more parties. Oh, but we get ecstatic kirtans and wonderful dramas and festivals that captivate our whole consciousness. Okay? So we've had some experiences like that. So the key to lose the taste for material things is not just restricting it, like in a diet. Just stopping these things won't work. But it's by engaging in a higher, more satisfying activity. Right? Just like if you have a $5 bill in your hand, you're not going to relinquish that so easily. Give me the $5. No. But if someone says, give me the $5 and I'll give you $100. Now how difficult is it to renounce that $5 bill? Not so difficult. Because you're getting something higher in exchange. So to give up the material sense objects artificially without any replacement is very difficult. Just like giving up that $5 bill with just getting a few grains of sand in exchange, no one will do. But if you are giving up those material sense objects and acquiring the bliss of spiritual life, then it becomes very easy. So Krishna has established this wonderful reciprocation that when we render devotional service, there is such a reciprocation. And driven by the higher taste, one naturally loses the lower taste. Right? So it happens very easily and naturally. One detaches. And that's why we say Krishna consciousness is an additive process. Just add bhakti to your life. You will naturally lose all of these other material attachments. Trying to rip out the material attachments without first adding spiritual bliss is very difficult. So wonderfully, Krishna has established this system of the higher taste and this active reciprocation. Think about it. Were it not for this active reciprocation by Krishna and each step of our process of devotional service, how we would even start. So this is the great mercy of the Supreme Lord. Even in unpurified state, we can experience some of this higher taste. Of course, the full taste, ruchi, comes once one has passed even the nishta stage of being fixed, and then the taste comes. So it's a very high, but we get glimmers of this taste in the beginning processes as well. So now, in the next 4 verses, Krishna is going to explain to Arjuna why it's dangerous to renounce work prematurely. Thinking to go to the forest, it's very dangerous. Why? Because the senses are very hard to control without bhakti. Without a superior engagement, the senses are very hard to control. Just like a young child, a 2-year-old child, particularly a boy, is very difficult to control unless there's some positive engagement. So Krishna now is going to speak in the next 4 verses about this, and this is again question 3 continued in terms of how does one sit, what is the mood of one when the senses are restrained. So verse 60, the senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. So here Krishna is saying, even one who is trying to control them, it doesn't work because the senses are so strong. So Krishna is saying here that the active process is far, far superior to the jnani or inactive process. Just detaching from matter is not going to work, right? Because the senses are very strong. They can carry away the mind of even someone with discrimination, the jnani who is trying very hard to control them. And this is the danger of the inactive path. Ultimately, you'll fall down. So if not purified of these desires and fully pure, then the mind will continue hankering on them. And ultimately, you will go back to your material activities. And that is why this detached action, this karma yoga, is more beneficial. Because from karma yoga, remember, one purifies of these desires. So by freeing oneself of these desires, that hankering will cease, right? And ultimately, that higher taste will bring one to the platform of bhakti. Of course, Krishna is going to say, go straight to bhakti, but this is how it works in a progressive stage, that one purifies from these sense desires as they move up that yoga ladder. Right? And so one cannot restrain their senses for too long. Yes, it can happen for short periods of time, but in the long term, ultimately it will fail. And thus Krishna is saying the active path is the safe path. When you get to engage your senses in Krishna, that is the best. Use the senses, very strong, but do so unattached to the result. Don't get the sinful reaction and become attached to Krishna. And in this way, the material things automatically becomes distasteful. Okay? And Srila Prabhupada says that Krishna consciousness is such a transcendently nice thing that automatically material enjoyment becomes distasteful. And we're going to see this over and over and over again in these purports. How to automatically become free from our material sense desires. Now 61. One who restrains his senses, keeping them under full control, and fixes his consciousness upon me, is known as a man of steady intelligence. So 2 parts to this verse. First, restraining the senses. And then, fixing consciousness upon me, or upon Krishna. We know our mind travels very, very fast, right? How fast, we it gives us some clue into this jnani path. How hard it is. We are chanting our rounds, and we're so intent on chanting and remembering Krishna. But within a few moments, we're remembering, back in third grade when somebody kicked us or we got into some dispute. The mind just starts meandering, and before we know it, we're in a whole nother world. Right? So this mind is very difficult to control. So, but how to control the mind ultimately? By bringing it to Krishna. And so this is the first time that Krishna is speaking about devotional service, at least indirectly, by saying, bring your consciousness upon me, right? Manmana, bhava mad bhakto. Krishna is going to say, do 4 things in devotional service. Manmana, think of me. Mad bhakto, become my devotee. Madjaji mam namaskuru, offer your homages and obeisances to me. These 4 things you do. So Krishna is saying, fixes his consciousness upon me. So he's giving, a hint to this highest perfection of yoga. Right? So in order to be successful, one has to restrain the senses and fix the mind on Krishna. But restricting the senses only occurs when one's mind is fixed on Krishna. So to achieve part 1, one must come to part 2. And thus, Shri Baladev Vidyabhushan says in this verse that the senses can be controlled only by the strength of devotional service to Krishna. Again, how to control the senses? Only by the strength of devotional service. And this example of Ambarish Maharaj and Durvasa Muni is such a exquisite illustration of this point. The Jnani Yogi, Durvasa Muni, was uncontrolled in his anger, invoking the fiery demon to attack Ambarish Maharaj. But Ambarish Maharaj, being the pure devotee, fully engaging all his entire senses in the service of Krishna, was very calm and undisturbed, even in the midst of the fiery demon attacking him. We have this demon attacking society today with this virus. Take to the position of Ambarish Maharaj. Read the pastimes in Srimad Bhagavatam about the great Ambarish Maharaj, and we'll see how to come, into a fixed mind, calm mind in the midst of these types of difficulties. So this very wonderfully illustrates that point about how one can restrict the senses by being fixed in the meditation of Krishna, as Ambarish Maharaj was. Now, what happens if we are not fixed in Krishna? Now Krishna gives in the next 2 verses, if you're fixed in Krishna, your senses will be restricted. Right? But now what happens if you don't? 62 and 63, we'll read these 2 verses together and then discuss. While contemplating the sense objects, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. From anger, complete delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. When memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. So here Krishna is saying, when you don't fix your senses on Krishna, then they will go to the sense objects. Right? That meaning one who is not Krishna conscious. The mind and senses, they must be fixed on something. They need some engagement. If they are not engaged with Krishna, they will certainly, undoubtedly, absolutely be engaged in the material sense objects. You may very temporarily, very short term, withdraw them from the material objects, but it won't last. So either the senses and mind have to be engaged in Krishna, or they will become engaged in the material sense objects. Because the senses are so active, if we don't engage them in Krishna consciousness, lust will develop. So we have 1 or 2 choices of where to repose our senses. And what happens when lust develops? All danger ensues. Lust is this intense material hankering. It originates from our pure love of Krishna. But when it comes in contact with the material world, it transforms into lust. And this lust kicks off a cycle, a chain, that leads to our fall down. From lust, we become angry because our desires are not fulfilled. And then we become delusional. And from delusion, we become bewildered, not knowing what to do. We lose all intelligence and thus fall down. Sometimes we wonder why people are doing such crazy bad activities. It's bringing so much suffering upon them. Why? Because it starts with this lust. It leads ultimately to the loss of intelligence, to know what is right and what is wrong. And that leads ultimately to one's fall down. So much suffering and sinful reactions. Right? So it starts here. So the senses have to be engaged somewhere, either in Krishna or the material sense objects. And Krishna is given now both scenarios. Right? In the 3rd chapter, Krishna is going to give us, very important, how to attack this lust, this, enemy who as Arjuna is going to ask, what is this, force that compels one to sin? And Krishna is going to say, it is lust only, Arjuna. And then we'll explain how to conquer this lust. Right? So we see in our hearing now the supremacy of bhakti over this jnanic process, this inactive process. Right? It's impossible to control the senses without bhakti. And Prabhupada gives the example of Lord Shiva with Parvati. Right? Only by Krishna consciousness can they be controlled. Right? Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj, we've already discussed. Even the pastime of Haridas Thakur, right, compared to the pastime of Vishwamitra Muni. That is all explained in these purports. Vishwamitra Muni, by the hearing the ankle bells of Menaka, became disturbed in his meditation. His intent was to perfect in meditation. Of course, there was some envy of what he might achieve from that meditation. So, Menaka was sent, and just hearing the ankle bells, not even seeing, just by the sound of the ankle bells, his meditation was disturbed. Yet Haridas Thakur, who was engrossed in chanting of the holy names, when Maya Devi herself came to allure the attention of Haridas Thakur, she was fully defeated because his senses were controlled by the supremely higher taste of bhakti. Higher taste of bhakti can subdue even the strongest of sense desires. So the only way to control them is by Krishna consciousness. So now the final question that Arjuna asked, how does he walk? And what does that mean? Not does he walk with a cane or does he walk fast or slow? No. It means, how does a man in transcendence engage his senses? What does he do? Does he do nothing? What does he do? So now Krishna will answer. But a person free from all attachments and aversion and able to control his senses through the regulator principles of freedom can obtain the complete mercy of the Lord. So he's uninterested in material sense objects. Both attachment and aversion are mentioned here. Now, we should not like or hate anything in the material world. Aversion is also a form of attachment. Right? So we should be neutral. Why? Because either liking or hating it consumes our consciousness. One, it was fixed that our consciousness is in Krishna, nothing else. 65. For one thus satisfied in Krishna consciousness, the threefold miseries of material existence exist no longer. And in such satisfied consciousness, one intelligence is soon well established. So we see that one is very satisfied when the senses are restrained. Right? When the senses are engaged in Krishna, one is very satisfied. Right? And one is not affected by the threefold miseries. But do the threefold miseries just disappear? If you put your hand in the bead bag and become a devotee, you'll not get a headache. Mosquitoes will avoid you. No COVID-19. No. But once in bhakti, the material activities, these threefold miseries, don't register. It is like background noise. Right? Give the example of the rain. When it is raining outside, You cannot stop the rain, but you can stop the effect of rain upon you by carrying an umbrella. So similarly, a devotee knows, yes, there's going to be ups and downs in the material world. I can't stop that. But I can stop the effect of that on me by taking to bhakti. Bhakti is like our umbrella in the rain. It protects us from the ups and downs. Right? So once in bhakti, one is so fully satisfied that whatever happens on the material platform, it doesn't register. Just like one is so fully absorbed in watching some TV show, whatever is happening behind them or around them doesn't even register. That is just a mundane example. But when one is fixed in Krishna, it's so sweet, such a higher taste. This param drishtva is such a higher taste that nothing else even registers. All calamities, they don't even amount to the smallest of insignificance to the mind of one who's so satisfied in their Krishna consciousness. But until one comes to bhakti, this cannot happen. One cannot be fully satisfied. It's 100% certain. The soul is never satisfied until it comes in connection with the spirit. Matter and spirit do not mix. And we're seeing this now. We have so many means to be happy, and it's all being uplifted and uprooted in an instant, in just a few short moments. And Vyasadeva, Srila Vyasadeva, in compiling all the Vedas and all the Puranas, the Mahabharata and all these great epics, still was unsatisfied. When was he fully satisfied? When he spoke directly about Krishna and Bhakti and wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we see this, even up to that level, one will not find full satiation, full satisfaction. It happens only in devotional service. So the ups and downs of material worlds, one sees them for what they are. They're just impacting the bodily platform. That is the mind and mood of this Citta Prajna. One doesn't think, I am this body. Just like driving in the car down the street. If somebody insults the car, the driver who has some sense is not insulted. One's feelings are not hurt because they don't identify with the car. So similarly, one in divine consciousness, whatever happens to the body happens. One is fixed on the higher platform, realizing it's not me. So as simple or as clear as it is to understand that the driver is not affected by the praise or insult of one's car, the devotee understands this body, it's not me. And thus one is able to transcend their consciousness. So what happens though when one lacks satisfaction that comes from Krishna consciousness? Then we see this in the next verse. One who is not connected with the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can neither have transcendental intelligence nor a steady mind, without which there is no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So now Krishna says, if you're not connected to Krishna, forget about it. No happiness, no peace. And if we need any more proof of that, just look around us today. This is the greatest blessing that we can take from this experience, that there is no peace and happiness without Krishna. It is the only path. And what do we need for happiness? We need peace of mind. And what do we need for peace of mind? A steady mind. And how to have a steady mind? We need transcendental intelligence. So Krishna is giving the link all in this verse. Happiness to peace, peace from a steady mind. Steady mind comes from good intelligence, right? Intelligence that can control the mind. Srila Prabhupada says very wonderfully in this verse, another post-it worthy statement by Srila Prabhupada: disturbance is due to want of an ultimate goal. This disturbance, these material wants, they'll always lead to disturbance because they'll never satisfy. But if our want is pleasing Krishna, knowing Him to be the enjoyer, the proprietor, and our best friend, as He'll tell us in the 5th chapter, then one will find peace. So in 65, Krishna says in Krishna consciousness one is fully satisfied. But in 66, one who doesn't know Krishna will never be happy, never satisfied, never peaceful, never anything. And this is a summary of actually all we need to know. Now, in 67, Krishna continues. As the strong wind sweeps away a boat on the water, even one of the roaming senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. The senses are very strong, that even they can carry away the intelligence. And we have this picture of the horses and the chariot and the ropes and the passenger, that the senses are so strong they can rip away the mind from the hands of the intelligence. So we have to be very careful. It is a good reminder that no matter how far we have come in devotional service, if we let the senses roam, boom, we can lose it all. And the story of Ajamil is a great example of that. He grew up, had a very wonderful Brahminical upbringing, grew up in a very wonderful family. But by seeing a prostitute with her client in the forest, just that glimpse, momentary glimpse of that activity, led to his complete destruction until the very end, in which he was finally saved. But we see how strong the senses are. They can rip one away from even the platform of devotional service if one is not careful. So one should be mindful of the strength of the senses. And as much as we are protecting the body today, we should protect the journey of the soul by protecting where the senses go, where we allow the senses to roam. It's very, very dangerous. Today we are not roaming anywhere out of fear of affliction for the body. Tomorrow, let us not let our senses roam anywhere out of fear of the journey of the soul and taking it off its path back home to Godhead. 68. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. And Prabhupada gives another wonderful point here in the purport. As enemies are curbed by superior force, the senses can similarly be curbed, not by any human endeavor, but only by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. Okay? Sorry, I did not move. So this superior force is needed. Have we heard this once or twice so far in this section? Over and over and over again, Prabhupada and Krishna are reminding us how to control the senses. 69. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is the night for the introspective sage. So here, there are two kinds of intelligence: material intelligence and spiritual intelligence. The material intelligence is aspiring for material success. The spiritual intelligence is aspiring for spiritual success. Both will use their senses, but both are on opposite platforms. The materialist and the devotee, they're opposite, sometimes literally, right? When the devotee is waking for Mangalarti, the materialist is just coming home from sense enjoyment and intoxication. You see this, 4 a.m. is when the spiritualists rise and the materialists are taking rest for the night. And so they're almost completely opposite. The materialist cannot understand how the spiritualist is wasting away life chanting and dancing and serving the Lord, not trying to acquire more money so they can eat nicely, sleep nicely, mate nicely, and defend nicely. What do you do if you don't eat eat meat and enjoy sex life and drink and gamble? What do you do? All day. They can't understand. And the spiritualist is thinking, wow, how they're wasting their life away trying to accumulate all these material things that will never satisfy. So to each, it is like night and day differences. Right? So the materialist is sleeping to the activities of the spiritualist, which is spiritual progress, and the spiritualist is sleeping to the materialist activity of acquiring wealth or material enjoyment. So both are asleep to each other's activities, and both are active in very different activities. So this is the night and day. So when we say night and day difference, Krishna originated that term here in Bhagavad Gita, 69th verse of Bhagavad Gita. Now, in 70, Krishna says, as a person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter the rivers, that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. So, a very important point here Krishna is making is that the desires are going to come. As long as we have this body, there will be different desires. But just don't pay attention to them. Don't honor them. Don't worry about the desire, why they're coming and where this idea came. Just let them go. Just as the oceans are undisturbed as rivers are flowing into them, one in fixed consciousness is undisturbed by the flow of mind's desires, just ignores them, unmoved. The devotee is just saying, let them go. Mind is saying, do this. Nonsense. Let it go. So don't worry about stopping those desires. That's impossible. Simply don't act on them. That is the key. The key to being steady and the key to finding peace. Right? And we have to be very deeply rooted in our Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, these flows will take us away. Just like a tree, if it's not deeply rooted in the soil, the first wind will blow it over. Similarly, if we're not fixed in Krishna consciousness, the first temptation of sense desires will fully uproot us from our Krishna consciousness. Right? So we have to take strong hold. And Prabhupada says in the purport here that in the middle of the purport, that is the proof of a Krishna conscious man, one who has lost all inclinations for material sense gratification, although the desires are present. So once we find this, we can be present. So our progress in bhakti is measured by how much we're detached from material desires. Even in the midst of them, we are detached. One's seniority in bhakti or advancement is not based on time. It's not based on whether one is initiated or not. Not based on how much one has memorized Shastra. That is not the measure. The measure has nothing to do with time or initiation status. It has to do with how much one is unmoved by the material desires. And I think Borijan Prabhu gives the story of Srila Prabhupada once was asked by a reporter, Prabhupada, what miracle can you do? And everybody was waiting for some amazing answer, and Prabhupada said, I can be in the room in the midst full of unclothed women and be undisturbed. That was the miracle. So this is the situation. Now the final two verses, Krishna summarizes in 71 how to find this peace, this citta prajna for Arjuna's benefit. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship, and is devoid of false ego. He alone can attain peace. So three things: no sense desires, no false sense of proprietorship, no false ego. If you have these three, then we'll find peace. So whenever we don't have peace, dissect which of these three is plaguing me, and we'll find out how to regain that peace. And these are all internal symptoms of one's consciousness. Again, consciousness is the key, nothing else. That is the measure of our success in devotional service. What is our consciousness? And so how does each lead to peace? Well, satisfying the senses, we know, in material desires is just going to lead to lust, which leads to anger and delusion and bewilderment, loss of intelligence, and then suffering. Who is peaceful in the midst of suffering? Nobody. So certainly number one is obvious. False sense of proprietorship. We can't own anything. If we try to own something that we cannot, it will certainly lead to frustration. The poor person who wants to own money will be frustrated because they cannot have it. Similarly, if we try to own anything, Krishna is the proprietor. So we must relinquish this false sense of proprietorship. And then finally, the false ego, thinking that I am independent. I can enjoy separate from Krishna. It doesn't happen. But as soon as we know I am dependent on Krishna, I am his part and parcel, and learn to serve Krishna, then one finds peace. So, relatively straightforward. But these are the three things one must become free from. And Prabhupada speaks about desirelessness in this purport, which is very important. Desireless doesn't mean to stop all desires. It means to desire to only please Krishna and have no material desires. I exist to please him. The quality of our bhakti is measured by this. How much am I pleasing Krishna? Not how nice am I singing, not how nice am I decorating the Lord, not how nice the offering tastes. Simply, how much am I pleasing Krishna? That is the measure of our the quality of that devotional service. So trying to be desireless by having no desire is not going to happen. The soul is active. Instead, the goal is to purify our desires. Srila Prabhupada says to change the quality of desires. That is the key. Desire to chant more, to serve Krishna more, to be free of these sense desires so I can serve you, Krishna, more. These are good desires. Right? So the Stritta Prajna, what do? They engage the senses by controlling them. They control the senses by enjoying Krishna consciousness. That is the summary of everything. Knowing bhakti is the only path to peace and happiness. Simply withdrawing the senses by some yoga process is not going to work. But by engaging them in Krishna consciousness, one finds peace and happiness. That is the summary of everything. And finally, in the last verse, Krishna summarizes the whole chapter. That is the way of spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. If one is thus situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. So Prabhupada gives the very inspiring statement here, that actually one can attain Krishna consciousness or divine life at once. This may seem like a very elevated platform. This may seem almost impossible in our conditioned current state. But as Prabhupada said, impossible is in the Fool's Dictionary. With the power of bhakti, it is so powerful that actually this state can be achieved at once. So it doesn't depend on how long we have been doing it. It depends on the sincerity of our efforts. That is the measure. So we can have great faith that even as Katavanga Maharaj experienced, we can have this instantly, depending on how sincere and strongly we want to desire it. Okay? So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur summarizes this chapter in the last paragraph. Prabhupada gives a commentary that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has summarized the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita as being the contents for the whole text. In the Bhagavad Gita, the subject matters are Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. In the second chapter, Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga have been clearly discussed, and a glimpse of Bhakti Yoga has also been given as the contents for the complete text. So this is chapter 2. A lot of material has been covered, and now next week we'll move into chapter 3, in which Arjuna will open chapter 3 with another question. As he has concluded chapter 2 with this question, he's going to open chapter 3, being confused by the verse in which Krishna said, keep all abominable actions far. Does that mean Arjuna should renounce, or should he work? And so he's going to ask Krishna, tell me what is best for me, and Krishna will instruct him in the beginning of chapter 3. And chapter 3 we're going to discuss how to do detached action, yajna, sacrifice, and many topics. Okay? So thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Any comments or questions?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Dhanavad Pranam.
Dhanavad.
Prabhuji, you talked about the three miseries, right, Prabhuji? Can you please once more explain? I was making notes, but I couldn't. The Adi Bhautik, the Adi Daivik, and the Adhyatmic.
Yeah. So the threefold miseries are the Atmic is the miseries of the body and mind. So our body and mind give us so many miseries. Um, Bhautik is the miseries of the different living entity. Conflict between the different living entities. And Adi Daivik is the miseries resulting from natural disasters and mass calamities. So these threefold are constantly being pushed upon us. So not only do we have the problems of birth, death, old age, and disease, the four problems, but then on top of that we have these threefold miseries, and they combine to create a very difficult existence in this material world. Okay. Hare Krishna. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandal Pranam.
Hare Krishna Bhatti, Dhanvat.
No question Prabhu, but the thing is very nice Prabhu, very nicely, like there is no kind of disconnectivity and everything is perfectly explained Prabhu, no question. Thank you very much Prabhu, very nice. And your images are every day and very nice. The image between two shades of winter and summer, very nice, very nice. I cannot watching for some time. I thought where is Prabhu getting all these images? Very good.
Thank you.
Krishna. We are very fortunate.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for your blessings. Okay. If there are no other questions, then next week we'll begin discussing chapter 3. Please forgive me for going a little bit long today, but in a long section. And so next week we'll discuss the first part of chapter 3. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda.